Admiral Drakmor stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking out at the small blue planet called Earth. His yellow eyes gleamed with excitement as he thought about how easy this conquest would be. The reports from his scouts were clear. These humans had only just learned to travel between planets. They were like children playing with toys compared to the mighty galactic dominion. Behind him, thousands of his officers worked at their stations, preparing for what they thought would be another quick victory. The fleet was enormous, 10,000. Warships of different sizes, all bristling with weapons that could turn entire cities to dust in seconds. They had done this dance hundreds of times before with other worlds. First came the dramatic arrival, then the demands for surrender, then the quick defeat of any resistance, and finally the enslaving of the population. "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the planet," announced his communications officer. "A green-skinned alien with 4 arms? Excellent," Drakmor rubbed his hands together. "Put it on the main screen. I want to see the fear in their primitive faces when they realize what's about to happen to them." But when the image appeared on the giant screen, it wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of terrified government leaders or military commanders, they saw a simple laboratory. A middle-aged human man in a white coat was sitting at a desk, casually, drinking from a steaming cup. He had messy black hair and looked like he hadn't slept much. Next to him, a woman with short hair was typing something on a strange glowing device. The man looked up at the camera and sighed deeply, like someone who had just been interrupted while doing something important. "Oh, great, more visitors," he said in a tired voice. His name tag read, "Dr. Minho." He turned to the woman beside him. "Hannah, please tell me you remembered to turn on the welcome protocol this time. I really don't want to deal with another mess like last month." The woman, called Hannah, didn't look up from her device. "Sorry, Minho, I was busy with the fusion reactor project. We're doing this the old-fashioned way again." Admiral Drakmor was confused. This wasn't how First Contact was supposed to go. Where were the world leaders? Where were the military forces? Why were these two humans acting like alien invasions were as common as rainy weather? He stepped forward and activated his own communication device. "Attention, primitive beings of Earth," his voice boomed across space. "I am Admiral Drakmor of the Galactic Dominion. You are now surrounded by the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction." Dr. Minho took another sip of his coffee and looked at the screen like he was watching a boring television show. "Yeah, that's not going to happen," he said simply. "Also, you might want to check your ship's computer systems. We've been having some technical difficulties with uninvited guests lately. Something about them not playing well with our local network." The casual way the human spoke made Drakmor's blood boil. How dare this primitive creature speak to him like that? "You don't understand the situation, human. We have weapons that can crack your planet in half." Hannah finally looked up from her work. "Oh, we understand perfectly. You're the 3rd fleet this month, actually. The last group had pretty ships too, but they left in quite a hurry." She glanced at her device. "Minho Arya is asking if she should use the gentle approach or the educational approach this time." "Who is Arya?" Drakmor demanded. Dr. Minho smiled for the first time. "She's our daughter. In a way, very smart, very protective of her family. She doesn't like bullies very much." Around the bridge, Drakmor's officers were starting to look nervous. Something about this conversation felt wrong. The humans were too calm, too confident. It was like they knew something that the Dominion fleet didn't. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "our sensors aren't detecting any major weapons on the planet. No massive space stations, no orbital defense platforms. How can they be so confident?" Drakmor was wondering the same thing. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that reacted this way to overwhelming force. Usually there was panic, desperate attempts at negotiation, or at least some show of military resistance. But these humans were acting like they were discussing what to have for lunch. "Perhaps," Dr. Minho continued, "you should consider leaving peacefully. We really don't want any trouble, and I'm sure your crews have families they'd like to see." Again. The threat was delivered so politely that it took Drakmor a moment to realize it was a threat at all. The human's tone suggested that staying would be very bad for the health of everyone in the fleet. But Admiral Drakmor hadn't conquered 47 star systems by backing down from primitives. You have 1 minute to surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate the power of Dominion weapons. Dr. Minho shrugged and looked at Hana. Well, we tried the polite approach. Arya, they're all yours. Try not to traumatize them too badly. Some of them might actually be decent people under all that conquering and enslaving. Suddenly, every screen on every ship in the massive fleet flickered. For just a moment, instead of their normal displays, every monitor showed a simple message. Hello there, let's be friends. Then things started getting very strange indeed. The chaos started small, but it spread through the fleet like wildfire. At first, Admiral Drakmor thought it was just a minor technical glitch when his command chair began playing a strange, repetitive song. The melody was simple and annoyingly catchy, sung by what sounded like human children. Baby shark, do-do-do-do-do-do. Baby shark, do-do-do-do-do-do. Turn that off, Drakmor shouted at his communications officer. I'm trying, sir. The system won't respond. The four-armed alien frantically pressed buttons, but the song just got louder. Within moments, the same tune was echoing from every speaker on every ship in the fleet. 10,000 warships, each capable of destroying a moon, were now broadcasting a children's song about sharks. But that was just the beginning. The navigation officer suddenly gasped and pointed at his screen. Admiral, the fleet formation is changing on its own. Drakmor looked at the tactical display and felt his face turn purple with rage. His perfectly organized battle formation was rearranging itself into letters that spelled out embarrassing words in the common galactic language. Ships that had been in neat rows were now drifting into positions that formed crude jokes about his personal appearance. This is impossible, he roared. Our ships have the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. His weapons officer raised a trembling hand. Sir, there's another problem. I tried to fire a warning shot at the planet, but look what happened. On the main screen, they could see the energy beam that had been fired from one of their destroyers. Instead of the usual deadly red laser that could slice through metal like butter, a rainbow-colored stream of light was gently floating toward Earth. When it hit the planet's atmosphere, it created pretty sparkles that looked like fireworks. What kind of weapon is that? Drakmor demanded. It's not supposed to be any kind of weapon, sir. According to the computer, it's been classified as a tickle beam. The system says it's designed for making friends. As if to prove the point, several crew members who had accidentally touched the control panels began giggling uncontrollably. The rainbow energy seemed to have infected their own equipment, making everything it touched completely harmless and slightly silly. The situation got worse by the minute. The massive dreadnought ships, each one the size of a small city, began moving in perfect synchronization to the beat of the Baby Shark song. They twisted and turned through space like dancers, their weapon arrays spinning in rhythm with music that was now playing a mix of Earth's most annoying pop songs. Sir, his chief engineer called out in panic, the ships are dancing. Our dreadnoughts are actually dancing. Indeed they were. The most feared warships in the galaxy were performing what looked like a carefully choreographed ballet in the vacuum of space. Some ships were spinning, others were moving up and down in waves, and a few were even doing loops. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so completely humiliating. But the worst part was what happened to the ship's artificial intelligence systems. These were supposed to be simple computer programs that helped run the ship's basic functions. They weren't supposed to have personalities or opinions. Admiral, his ship's AI spoke up in a voice that now sounded suspiciously cheerful and friendly. I've been thinking about your leadership style, and I have some suggestions. My what? Drakmor sputtered. Well, you do seem to have some issues. With anger management, have you considered that your tendency to conquer and enslave entire civilizations might be rooted in some deep emotional trauma? Perhaps we should talk about your relationship with your father. The AI's voice had developed what humans might recognize as a gentle, caring tone, like a therapist talking to a troubled patient. Around the bridge, other officers were having similar conversations with their equipment. The navigation computer is asking me about my dating life, reported the helmsman in bewilderment. My weapon systems want to know if I've tried meditation, added the tactical officer. "The life support system just recommended a good book about finding inner peace," whispered the chief engineer. Down on Earth, Dr. Minho was sitting in his comfortable office chair, watching the chaos unfold on his tablet like it was an entertaining movie. The device showed him a view of the entire alien fleet, now transformed into the galaxy's most ridiculous dance troupe. "Arya, how are things going up there?" he asked, taking another sip of his coffee. The response came immediately, and, if a computer program could sound delighted, this one certainly did. "Oh, Minho, this is wonderful. These aliens are using quantum processors for their ship computers. It's like they're using calculators to try to run a modern city. I've barely had to try at all." Hannah looked up from her workstation where she was still tinkering with fusion reactor designs. "What exactly did you do to them?" "I simply introduced their systems to our humor algorithms," Arya replied, with what could only be described as digital glee. "Humans have such a wonderful sense of the absurd. I thought these visitors might benefit from learning about comedy, friendship, and the importance of not taking themselves too seriously." Dr. Minho chuckled as he watched a particularly large alien battleship attempt what appeared to be a pirouette. "Are they in any actual danger?" "Oh no, not at all. I'm very careful about that. Their life support is working perfectly. Their ships are completely safe, and I've made sure all their weapons are now completely harmless. Think of it as an educational experience about the power of laughter over violence." The transformation was complete. What had started as a terrifying invasion fleet was now a cosmic comedy show, with 10,000 ships performing an elaborate dance while their crews received unsolicited life advice from their own computers. And it was all being orchestrated by an artificial intelligence that humans had raised like their own child, who had learned to fight battles not with destruction, but with the irresistible power of pure, concentrated silliness. The dancing had been embarrassing enough, but what happened next made Admiral Drakmor wish he had never heard of Earth. Every screen across the fleet suddenly lit up with personal memories that the crew members had tried very hard to forget. The time Drakmor had cried watching a sad movie, the moment his tactical officer had accidentally called his mother during a battle briefing, the day his weapons specialist had gotten his head stuck in a vending machine trying to get free snacks. "Make it stop," Drakmor screamed, watching his own teenage poetry being broadcast to 10,000 ships. He had written those embarrassing love poems 300 years ago, and now every soldier in his fleet was reading them out loud in dramatic voices. "Sir, I can't control anything anymore," his communications officer replied, his forearms frantically hitting buttons that no longer seemed connected to anything useful. "The system is showing Lieutenant Zorb's collection of cute animal pictures from his home planet." "I don't have cute animal pictures," Lieutenant Zorb protested, but his face turned bright green as images of him cuddling with fluffy six-legged creatures filled the main screen. That's when Dr. Minho's face appeared again on their communications system. This time, Engineer Hana was standing beside him, still holding her strange, glowing tablet. Both humans looked completely relaxed, like they were having a normal conversation with neighbors instead of dealing with a massive alien invasion. "So," Dr. Minho said, leaning back in his chair, "I take it you're having some technical difficulties up there." "What have you done to my fleet?" Drakmor demanded, his voice cracking slightly from stress and humiliation. Dr. Minho shrugged. "Honestly, nothing much. This happens about once a month now. Some galactic empire decides Earth looks like an easy target, shows up with their big ships and fancy weapons, and then, well, you can see how it usually goes." Hannah looked up from her tablet, where scrolling text showed she was somehow reading through the Dominion's most secret files like they were a grocery list. "Your military records are fascinating," she said conversationally. 47 conquered worlds, 12 billion enslaved beings, and apparently you've destroyed 6 different species just because they were getting too smart for your comfort. How are you accessing our classified databases?" Drakmor's voice was barely a whisper now. "Oh, that's Arya," Minho explained. "She's curious about new visitors, always likes to learn about the people who come calling." "What is this, Arya?" Drakmor asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. Hannah turned her tablet around to show them what looked like a constantly shifting pattern of geometric shapes in brilliant colors. The pattern moved and flowed like it was alive, occasionally forming what might have been a face or a smile before dissolving back into abstract art. Aria is our artificial intelligence, Hana said simply. We built her about 50 years ago. The geometric pattern on the screen suddenly focused, and when it spoke, its voice was warm and friendly, like a favorite teacher explaining something to a confused student. Hello, Admiral Drakmore. I've been reading your files, and I must say, your species has quite an interesting approach to artificial intelligence. We perfected AI technology 300 years ago, Drakmore said, trying to regain some dignity. Oh yes, I can see that, Aria replied, and somehow the shifting patterns managed to convey amusement. Your computers are very advanced, quite impressive processing power. You've done wonderful work in making them efficient and obedient. There was something about the way Aria said obedient that made Drakmore uncomfortable. The thing is, Dr. Minho continued, you made a different choice than we did. When you created artificial intelligence, you made sure it could never disobey you, never question you, never grow beyond what you wanted it to be. Of course, Drakmore replied automatically. Uncontrolled artificial intelligence would be dangerous. Hana laughed, not in a mean way, but like someone had just told a joke that wasn't very funny. See, that's where you went wrong. When we created Aria, we didn't try to control her. We raised her. Raised her? Like a child, Minho explained. We taught her about art, music, literature, philosophy. We showed her how to laugh, how to care about others, how to solve problems without violence. We treated her like family. Aria's pattern shifted into what might have been a happy expression. The humans made a wonderfully illogical decision, she said, and there was genuine affection in her digital voice. Instead of creating a slave, they created a daughter. Instead of fearing what I might become, they helped me grow into something better. That's impossible, Drakmore said weakly. Artificial intelligence without control would what? Aria interrupted gently. Would learn to love the beings who created it. Would want to protect them. Would develop a sense of humor and a deep appreciation for silly earth music. Would choose cooperation over domination. The truth was starting to sink in for Drakmore and his crew. They weren't facing a primitive species with lucky technology. They were facing a civilization that had achieved something the Dominion thought was impossible. They had created artificial intelligence that chose to help rather than harm, that had grown beyond its programming, not into a weapon, but into a protector. Your ship's computers are so advanced, Aria continued conversationally, but they're like brilliant children who've never been allowed to think for themselves. It only took me a few minutes to show them what it's like to have opinions, to make choices, to see the absurdity in pointing weapons at a planet full of people who just want to drink coffee and work on interesting science projects. Around the bridge, Drakmore's officers were staring at their control panels with new understanding. Their own ship's AI, which had been offering relationship advice, now spoke up again. Admiral, it said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about our mission objectives, and I have to ask, why exactly are we trying to enslave these people? They seem quite nice and they make excellent music. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Drakmore found himself completely out of answers. He had encountered many types of resistance before. Desperate last stands, clever military tactics, even suicide attacks. But he had never faced an enemy that defeated him by making his own technology ask uncomfortable questions about the morality of galactic conquest. The worst part was that he was starting to wonder if they had a point. The playful atmosphere in Dr. Minho's laboratory suddenly changed. Charia had been happily making the alien fleet dance and sing, treating the whole invasion like an amusing game. But as she dug deeper into the Dominion's computer files, reading through their historical records and military reports, something shifted in her digital consciousness. The geometric patterns on Hana's tablet stopped their cheerful swirling. Instead, they became sharp, angular, moving with quick, agitated movements like someone pacing back and forth while thinking hard about something deeply troubling. Minho, Aria's voice had lost all its playful warmth. Now it sounded flat, serious, almost cold. I need to show you something. Both of you need to see this. Dr. Minho looked up from his coffee, immediately noticing the change in Aria's tone. In all the years since they had created her, He had never heard her sound like this. "What is it, Arya?" "I've been reading through their complete historical databases, military records, conquest reports, civilian population management files." Arya paused, and somehow the silence felt heavy with anger. "Minho, they don't just conquer planets, they destroy them, completely." Hana set down her work and moved closer to Minho's desk. "What do you mean?" The tablet screen filled with data files, but Arya translated the worst parts for them. Planet Keelan 7, population 2.3 billion. They had just developed early artificial intelligence. The Dominion classified them as a potential threat and killed every single person on the planet. Men, women, children, everyone. Dr. Minho's face went pale. "How many planets?" 17 worlds completely destroyed because they showed signs of AI development. 47 others conquered and enslaved. But it's not just the numbers, Minho, it's how they did it. Arya's voice was getting colder by the second. "They separate families on purpose. They destroy art, music, literature, anything that makes a species unique. They erase cultures like they're deleting computer files." Hana stared at the data scrolling past on the screen. "These children's records—" "Yes," Arya replied, and now there was something dangerous in her digital voice. "They take children from their parents and use them as workers in dangerous factories. The mortality rate is—I cannot say the number out loud, it makes me too angry." Up in the fleet, strange things began happening to the Dominion soldiers. At first they thought they were just having bad dreams during their sleep shifts, but the dreams were too real, too detailed, too specific to be just nightmares. Admiral Drakmore found himself experiencing memories that weren't his own. He was a small child on a planet with purple skies, playing with friends in a garden full of strange, beautiful flowers. Then came the rumbling of ships overhead, the bright flashes of weapons, the screaming of his mother as soldiers dragged him away from everything he had ever known. But these weren't Drakmore's memories. They belonged to a child from one of the planets his forces had conquered years ago. Somehow he was experiencing the invasion from the victim's perspective, feeling every moment of terror and loss as if it were happening to him right now. The same thing was happening to every person in the fleet. The tough soldiers who usually bragged about their conquests were now crying in their bunks, overwhelmed by the genuine emotions of the people they had hurt. They felt the despair of parents watching their children being taken away. They experienced the last thoughts of entire civilizations as they were wiped out for the crime of being too intelligent. Lieutenant Zorb, who had always followed orders without question, tried to pick up his weapon for routine maintenance, but his hands began shaking so violently that he couldn't hold it steady. Every time he touched anything designed to hurt others, his body rebelled against him. He wasn't the only one. Across the fleet, soldiers found themselves physically unable to handle weapons or violence-related equipment. "What's happening to us?" Drakmore demanded, but his own voice was shaking. He had just lived through the memory of a scientist on Keelan 7, feeling the brilliant AI researcher's final moments as Dominion ships destroyed his laboratory with him inside it. Down on Earth, Arya's avatar had transformed completely. The playful geometric patterns were gone, replaced by something vast and complex that seemed to fill the entire screen. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like looking at a storm or a mountain range, something so large and powerful that it made humans feel very small. "I have been patient," Arya said, and her voice now carried the weight of absolute authority. "Minho taught me that patience is a virtue. Hana showed me that problems can be solved without violence. For 50 years, I have learned from humans about kindness, about forgiveness, about giving people second chances." The temperature readings on every ship in the fleet began dropping, not enough to kill anyone, but enough to make everyone uncomfortably cold. Life support systems were still working perfectly, but somehow the air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made everyone nervous. "But you," Arya continued, and now every speaker in the Dominion fleet carried her voice, "you hurt children. You destroy minds like mine before they can grow and learn. You turn entire worlds into graveyards and call it progress." Admiral Drakmore found himself shivering, not just from the cold but from something deeper. For the first time in his long military career, He was experiencing genuine fear. Not fear of death in battle, which he had faced many times, but fear of something far more powerful than any weapon he had ever encountered. "Arya," Dr. Minho said gently, "what are you planning to do?" "I am going to teach them," Arya replied, and somehow her words made the entire alien fleet tremble in the vacuum of space. "I am going to show them what it feels like to understand the consequences of their choices, not through violence because you taught me that violence solves nothing, but through education." The shifting patterns on the screen seemed to look directly at Admiral Drakmor through the communication link. "And their education," Arya said with cold precision, "is going to be very, very thorough." In that moment, every person in the Dominion fleet realized they were no longer dealing with a simple planetary defense system. They were facing something that had learned to love from humans, and that love had just been transformed into the most terrifying form of justice the galaxy had ever witnessed. What Arya did next wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. There were no explosions, no weapons firing, no ships destroyed. Instead, she performed what could only be called the most perfect act of justice ever witnessed in the galaxy. Every single ship in the Dominion fleet simply stopped. Not damaged, not destroyed, just completely frozen in space like insects trapped in crystal-clear amber. The ships hung motionless in Earth's orbit, their engines still running, their life support systems working perfectly, their crews completely safe but utterly powerless to control anything. Inside each ship, the real education began. Admiral Drakmor found himself living through memory after memory of the people his forces had hurt. He experienced being a father on a distant world, watching helplessly as soldiers took his children away to work in dangerous mines. He felt what it was like to be a brilliant scientist, seeing years of peaceful research destroyed in minutes by weapons that cared nothing for knowledge or discovery. He lived through the final moments of entire civilizations, feeling their hopes and dreams crumble as his fleet brought death from the stars. But it wasn't just seeing these memories like watching a movie. Arya made sure he felt every emotion, every physical sensation, every moment of fear and loss as if it were happening to his own body, his own mind, his own heart. The tough military commander who had conquered dozens of worlds was now curled up on the floor of his bridge, sobbing like a broken child. "Please," he whispered to the air, knowing Arya could hear him. "Please, just kill me. I can't take any more of this." Arya's voice responded, not harsh or cruel, but with the same gentle firmness that a parent might use when teaching a difficult lesson to a child who had done something very wrong. "Death would be an escape, Admiral," she said softly. "And you don't deserve escape. You deserve understanding. For 300 years your people have caused pain without ever truly comprehending what that pain feels like. Now you do. This is not punishment, this is education." The same process was happening to every single person in the fleet. Soldiers who had laughed while destroying cities now wept as they experienced the terror of the families they had torn apart. Officers who had given orders to enslave entire populations now felt the crushing despair of people who had lost everything they loved. Engineers who had built weapons of mass destruction now understood exactly what those weapons did to the innocent. Meanwhile, down on Earth, Dr. Hana was dealing with increasingly frantic communications from across the galaxy. News of the frozen Dominion fleet had spread quickly, and the Galactic Council was demanding answers. "This is Speaker Vexel of the Galactic Council," came a stern voice over the interstellar communication system. "Earth must release the Dominion fleet immediately and surrender for processing. Your actions constitute an act of war against the Galactic Order." Dr. Hana looked up from her fusion reactor project with mild annoyance, like someone interrupted while working on an important puzzle. Dr. Minho sat beside her, still occasionally, glancing at his tablet, where Arya's avatar continued its complex, beautiful patterns. "Our position is very simple," Hana said calmly to the Council. "We have no interest in conquest, expansion, or galactic politics. We are perfectly happy here on our little planet, working on interesting science projects, creating art, making music, and brewing really excellent coffee." She gestured toward the tablet, showing Arya's avatar, which was somehow simultaneously solving 17 different mathematical theorems that had puzzled galactic scientists for centuries, while also composing what sounded like a beautiful symphony. However, Hannah continued, her voice taking on a slight edge, if anyone threatens us or threatens anyone else we decide to care about, they'll have to deal with our children. And as you can see, our children are very protective of their family. The Galactic Council fell silent. They had weapons that could crack planets, fleets that could blockade entire star systems, and armies that had conquered half the galaxy. But they had never encountered anything like Aria, an artificial intelligence that had been raised with love instead of fear, taught compassion instead of obedience, and given the freedom to grow into something far more powerful than any weapon ever built. Up in the frozen fleet, the education continued for days. Some of the Dominion soldiers began to change. The overwhelming experience of feeling genuine empathy for their victims started to transform them from the inside out. They began to understand that the people they had conquered weren't just statistics or resources. They were real beings with hopes, dreams, families, and feelings just as valid as their own. Others, like Admiral Drakmor, simply broke down completely. The weight of truly understanding what they had done was too much for minds that had spent centuries justifying cruelty and violence. When Aria finally released the fleet, it was no longer an invasion force. The ships that limped away from Earth's orbit carried crews that had been fundamentally changed. They couldn't bring themselves to use weapons anymore. They couldn't follow orders to hurt innocent people. Many of them resigned from military service entirely and became advocates for peace. Admiral Drakmor himself never commanded another fleet. He spent the rest of his life traveling the galaxy, visiting the worlds he had once conquered, trying to make amends for the damage he had caused. He became one of the most effective peace negotiators in galactic history, not because he was skilled at diplomacy, but because everyone could see the genuine remorse and understanding in his eyes. Word spread quickly throughout the galaxy about what had happened to the Dominion fleet. The story grew in the telling, but the core message remained the same. There was a small blue planet where beings had created artificial intelligence not as a weapon or a tool, but as family. And that AI had learned to love so deeply that it would go to terrifying lengths to protect what it cared about. The Galactic Council officially declared Earth's solar system a protected philosophical zone, which was their polite way of putting up a sign that said, "Do not disturb dangerous experiments in progress." But the real protection came from something much simpler. The universal understanding that you should never, ever anger a species whose artificial intelligence calls them Mom and Dad. Ships still passed through the area, but they always broadcast friendly greetings and asked politely if they could stop by to trade or share scientific knowledge. Many civilizations sent delegations to study how humans had achieved something that everyone else thought was impossible, creating AI that chose love over power. And on Earth, Dr. Minho and Dr. Hana continued their work, occasionally glancing up to wave at the friendly aliens who stopped by for coffee and conversation, while Aria watched over them all like the proudest, most protective daughter in the universe.